Tonight, we're diving into a military operation that was so stunning, it literally redrew the geopolitical map overnight.
And it all starts right here, January 3rd, 2026 at 2 in the morning. In the dead of night, while pretty much everyone was asleep, this specific moment, well, this marks the end of an era. And it was all carried out with a speed and secrecy that is just breathtaking.
And yeah, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This one sentence just captures the pure audacity of the whole mission. We're not talking about a coup or some kind of popular uprising. No, this was a targeted extraction, a special forces operation that feels like it was ripped straight from the pages of a thriller novel.
You have to remember, for more than a decade, Nicolás Maduro seemed absolutely untouchable. He was this permanent fixture in Venezuelan politics, and it didn't matter what kind of pressure was put on him.
I mean, think about it. This is the guy Hugo Chavez himself picked to carry on the revolution. He survived plots from within his own government, he stared down massive protests in the streets, and he weathered crippling international sanctions that even put a $50 million bounty on his head. The man just seemed invulnerable.
And yet, after all those years of clinging to power, his entire reign, the whole apparatus of control he'd built, it was all taken apart in just 90 minutes. That's less time than it takes to watch a movie. That's all it took. It's just a stunning example of the kind of efficient, overwhelming force that was brought to bear. So you gotta ask, right? How on earth did a leader who survived so much for so long fall so quickly? Well, the answer isn't just about what happened on the battlefield that night. The real groundwork for this was laid long before a single shot was fired.
You see, this wasn't just a military call. It was fundamentally a legal one. The real game changer was a massive shift in how the United States government decided to look at Nicolás Maduro.
And this is the legal move that made the whole thing possible. It was a complete reframing. The U.S. basically stopped treating Maduro as a head of state and started treating him as the head of a massive criminal organization, the Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns. It's named for those sun insignias that high-ranking Venezuelan generals wear on their uniforms. This Narco-State indictment changed everything. It turned a political problem into a law enforcement problem.
And this new legal angle didn't just appear out of nowhere. The fuse was being lit for a while. First, you have another contested election in Venezuela that ramps up tensions. Then, things get hot in the Caribbean with a few naval skirmishes. And then came the final piece of the puzzle. President Trump, during his second term, declares that the old Monroe Doctrine, the U.S. policy against foreign meddling in the Americas, wasn't just some historical idea anymore. It was now active, enforceable policy.
And with that major policy decision came a very direct, very simple order. It wasn't, let's negotiate more, or let's add more sanctions. It was a simple command to the military and intelligence agencies. Bring him to New York. The target was officially set.
Okay, so the order is given. Now how do you actually pull this off? Well, this whole thing was designed to be a surgical strike, not some full-blown invasion. The goal was to deliver a masterclass in overwhelming a target without kicking off a massive war.
The plan itself broke down into two clean phases. Phase 1 was all about blinding and deafening Venezuela's defenses. F-35s and specialized electronic warfare planes went in, jammed all their sensors, and took out their very advanced Russian-made S-300 air defense batteries. Once the coast was clear, Phase 2 kicked in, the absolute best of the best. Delta Force and the legendary Night Stalkers Aviation Regiment went in to grab their guy.
And you know what? It worked. Perfectly. Within minutes, they had both Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, in custody. There was a little bit of resistance. One of the helicopters apparently took some fire, but the exfiltration itself was clean. They were lifted out of the middle of Caracas and flown directly to a U.S. Navy ship waiting offshore. Mission accomplished.
But that leads us to the biggest question of all, right? Why this time? Why did this incredibly risky mission work when so many other attempts to get Maduro out of power had failed so spectacularly? Well, it really came down to three critical factors.
Three things made all the difference here. First was the technology. The CIA had an unblinking eye in the sky, a drone that provided constant 24/7 surveillance. Second, you had incredible human intelligence. A mole, somebody very high up in the Venezuelan military, gave that final go signal, confirming Maduro's exact location. And third, there was this powerful sense of history, of precedent, which was almost a psychological weapon in itself.
And that historical part, that was no accident. The raid happened exactly 36 years to the day after the U.S. invaded Panama to capture another strongman, Manuel Noriega. The timing was deliberate. It was meant to send a powerful psychological message to every other leader in the hemisphere.
So, as you can imagine, the aftermath was instant and it was chaotic. The world immediately fractured into two camps, and each one had a completely different way of seeing what had just gone down.
On one side, you had countries like Argentina that were celebrating the operation, calling it a moment of liberation. And on the other side, you had the predictable outrage from nations like Russia and Iran who were screaming that this was a blatant, illegal act of American imperialism. A sharp geopolitical line was drawn right then and there.
But beyond all the global arguments, the operation sent a really chilling, really clear message to other authoritarian leaders in the region. And the takeaway was simple. Being the president, having that title, it offers you zero protection from a U.S. federal indictment if the political will is there to actually enforce it.
And so that leaves us with this final, huge, unanswered question. The raid itself was a success, no doubt. But what happens next? Does taking out the man at the very top actually lead to a new, flourishing democracy? Or does it just create a massive power vacuum in a country that's already been pushed to the absolute brink? That is the very uncertain future this operation created.